Well, thank you, Brandy. Trying to think of how long we've known each other. I know our kids go to the same school, which is pretty cool. But I think I knew you before we found that out.
Yes. So we met, I think, through Holly and Michael.
Yeah. And then we found out that our kids were in the same class.
It was really weird because it's when you sent out Christmas cards.
Oh, yeah.
And then my son goes, "Why is there a picture of Tessa on our?" And I go, "Wait, you know her?"
Yeah, that's so cool. It's funny. Yeah. There's a lot of reasons why I wanted to invite you into the Building Forth podcast. And one of the reasons is because you're doing something that I try to do as well. And it's not easy to do. But try to live this both and experience with this as much integrity and fullness as possible. So I'm going to speak a little bit to myself on what I mean by the both and experience and see how that lands with you. But both and in my experience is, which is something I often tell my clients too at the very beginning of the very first session, is that I myself am both broken and whole, holding those paradoxes together. My own history of struggles with certain mental illnesses and treatments that have brought me to a place of intense self-awareness, where it's not the absence of those intensity for me, for example, of anxiety, but rather it's the processing it of as it comes in, learning how to process it in real time, recognizing its presence, learning to live in that balance. Again, having it be a tool and teacher of mine. That way I can offer my clients, I hope, somebody who walks with them in solidarity, not ahead of them and not behind them, but beside them, in a way that is healing for them. I'm offering my brokenness and wholeness to them, and they are also broken, and I remind them also that they're whole and how to live into that wholeness. So that's one area of a both and. Another area is we're both very spiritual. We both have some level of a faith of origin of Christianity, and then have moved into a depth that encompasses interspirituality, that is feeding, that is very nourishing, and it's expansive and comprehensive. And I know I have become aware of the very real reality of multidimensional existence. So when I'm with somebody as a client in front of me, I'm not just aware of their physical presence, but there's multidimensional aspects of me that's also engaging in multidimensional aspects of them, even across time. And I'm becoming more and more aware of all the different aspects that are connecting with them, and bringing that into a focus when we're talking in the physical realm. So there's healing that happens, I hope, at different levels. And then lastly, the both and piece is we both are really touched by the collective angst that's going on, especially in our state of Texas. And how do we manage our own engagement with the collective energy in a way that keeps us, that we're finding balance, so we can offer our clients some sort of calm in the midst of the maelstrom that's happening energetically. How do those three kinds of ways of both and land with you?
Well, I would say right in the midst of what feels like chaos and people feeling like their rights have been stripped away. I was doing trauma therapy on myself so that I could hold space, because, through my own mental health struggle, it's like I learned that avoidance was my top coping skill, and that was not getting me anywhere. It creates like this illusion of standing still while everyone else and everything is marching onward. And so learning to step outside of avoidance and embrace emotions and thoughts in the human experience as though it is precious and divine. Sorry. But that was really transformational, and through the process of therapy, through the process of spiritual growth, my life reached a level of joy and empowerment and other things that I didn't think were possible. But life is complicated, right? And as an empath, the energy in the world just, especially as COVID, the pandemic began, it was just so intense, and you can feel all the fluctuations, and then you get to see it one-on-one, both within your family or your friends, and then clients. It became really intense, like the intensity, the polarity, it was just very dramatic. So yeah, finding coping skills and using really advanced spiritual techniques and therapy techniques. I think yesterday I actually did trauma therapy on myself and was able to get really grounded. And then, like magic, bigger things opened up this morning.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Huh. Well, that was a nice little invitation for me to jump right on in. Would you mind could you give us a little bit of what that looked like? What was the trauma technique that you used that opened it up, and then some of your experiences today?
Well, I kind of went through and I acknowledged all the different parts of myself. So the part of myself that was really struggling was the classic helplessness regression. So I think with a lot of women and men that I work with, one of their top most difficult things to feel in the midst of a trauma response is to feel trapped. And so that's one of the most intense experiences, because I think the theory behind it is we regress into a state, like a time in our life when we really were trapped. We didn't have decisions. Other people really did have control over our life, whether that's childhood or another traumatic experience. There's a regression that happens because all our neural pathways related to feeling trapped are linked to all the different experiences, and so we regress into that state. So I had to acknowledge that state was coming up for me, and then I did a trauma technique to help my empowered self give my trapped self its skills, if that makes sense.
Was it just skills, or was it both skills and a certain energy flux or flow? Could you feel that?
It's all of it together.
Okay.
So it's like, it was so interesting because you look straight forward to the right and to the left as light is pulsating through your eyeballs.
And what color light is coming in for you?
For me, I needed to do red and yellow.
Is this something you... Okay, so you're doing ETT, which is
emotional transformation therapy.
Emotional transformation therapy, which was developed by whom again?
Stephen Vasquez, Dr. Stephen Vasquez.
In Austin, Texas, yes. And I'm going to put a link to ETT because people might be interested in that. I know it's a pretty cool avant-garde sort of therapy that really works. So anyways, you're staring into a box that is giving you literally the colors. Literally
the color yellow light. Yellow light is coming through the box into my eyeballs, and you've got a flicker rate for brain entrainment. So the certain frequency where I felt most entrapped, I'm going to work with that. And then using similar to EMDR, you have the right and left hemisphere, but with ETT you can also do above and below, which is really interesting because it has like a multidimensional feel. And I just found the area where I could feel empowerment energy. I could really almost get a visual of source light just pouring through and rippling through the world.
What was the color of source light for you?
All the colors.
Oh, beautiful. Okay.
Which appears white light.
Yeah.
And then I transpose that position onto the disempowered position, and then multiple other positions. So you're really messing with your neural pathways and potentially messing with the chakras and helping expand the positive resource in those other areas. And at the same time acknowledging the parts of self. So my helpless self with my empowered self.
Uh-huh. And when you're giving this energy into the helpless self, do you name them as helpless self or power self, or is it just a sense of feel, like a subjective feel?
Yeah, it's very subjective what each person needs, what resonates with them. For me, it's definitely different parts of self, different layers of self. Sometimes my higher self will come through. Sometimes it's childhood parts of self. Sometimes, and really with this one, it was the inner teenager.
The inner teenager.
Just like wanting to put her arms up and say, it isn't fair.
Not fair.
Screw all of you. So.
Yeah. Okay. And then can you feel in the chakra, you brought up the energy centers, can you feel an unblocking as that starts, that energy, the empowered energy moves in? Is there an unblocking that happens that you feel? Or?
Yeah, often you can feel lightening in a certain area, and it is not necessarily connected with the exact chakra you would expect, because there's 108 or 115 chakras.
Yeah, there's a lot, I'm sure.
There's a lot. So, but as an empath, I can actually physically feel the energy moving through, and I can feel it pulsating, and I feel that with my clients too. And I can feel when they're really moving strong energy, and then I can feel when it's really not moving as much. And I'm like, let me check in with you. Are you dissociated?
Yeah.
It's really cool though to be able to feel it and know if my client is stuck and if they're not, because sometimes when the emotions are really big, people lose their words. I have clients who will get really overwhelmed, and it's always a process, which I learned this from ETT, but I also learned it spiritually of, like, I call it like the infinity of just gently moving into the feeling, activating it, and then grounding to the present moment, grounding to your positive resources, grounding to the colors around you, the sounds around you, getting back to the space that you're in, and just doing that back and forth dance kind of gently. Some people need it much more gently than others. Some people don't need as much grounding, so it just depends on the person.
And that's cool, because that builds the muscle of being able to not only deal with past stuff that's happened to them when they're on their own. It builds the muscle of learning how to bring in the present in the groundedness sense. And then going on in their life, maybe anything that's emotional or any kind of just daily living, you can learn how to take what's coming in and then still remain grounded. So it's really building that muscle, it sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely. And the muscle to be able to connect with the grounded kind of Gaia-centered, calm energy, and connect with higher realms at the same time, and be able to kind of balance the two of those, because I've had clients really getting lost in one or the other.
That's cool. That's one of the reasons why I love talking to you, and because you and I are colleagues too, so we meet once a month and talk about our cases and to support each other in being the best healers we can in any cases that are difficult for us, and we pick each other's brains. But your way, your experience as a therapist and your way of dealing with it really helps me in my work. So I'm always so appreciative of our connecting.
I feel the same way.
Thanks. One of the things that I do when I'm with clients is I've learned to trust my intuition. Some of these are cosmic downloads that I'm getting. But it's this weird balance for me. Obviously, I can't speak for anybody else who does this kind of intuitive work, but I also know that I'm very liable to bring in what I think are cosmic downloads, and then it's really my own issues or filters, and then I'm not really helping the client. I'm sort of dealing with my own blockage. So I have to be very careful of trusting my intuition while at the same time holding it somewhat lightly, which for me, when I have that balance, it actually helps me to pick out what's mine and what's not. It's a weird thing that I've had to do myself. But when I'm with certain people, it happens a lot actually, I almost get, well, I guess I do get downloads of maybe even some of their past lives as well as life in between lives. In other words, the life in time, space, or in the astral before coming in, and even some of the contracts or some of the plans that they made for this life. And those kind of come, sometimes they're images, sometimes they're just conceptual energies that aren't images, but more sentient, clairsentient type reception. And when they're talking, because you'd said something earlier, is that you can tell when someone's stuck. And it really does feel like an energetic stuckness. Like you can see where they've come to an end of a sentence or some area that's a pitfall and they don't know how to get out of that particular thing. And I experience that as almost a condensation into a blackness or a black hole or there's a trapness there. And often how I perceive it on my end is that somewhere on the aura of their body, I can perceive where that stuckness is happening. And what I try to do, and some of my clients will attest, is I'll say, okay, stop, right, stop right there. Okay. So then I almost like take a tab, on a computer, you can widen the screen by 2 fingers and then widen it up. Like that's what I just like, stop. Okay. And then I'll just tap almost on the part of the energetic body that I see it on. And then I widen it. So tell me about that right there. Where do you sense any pressure? If you could locate the energy issue that you have right now, if you could locate it on your body, where is it living right now? They almost always have an answer. Mm-hmm. Even if they don't believe or understand, they almost like, I kind of feel it kind of down here to my left on my hip. And I'll say, now if you could give it a color, what would it be? Don't think about it. What would the color be? That kind of thing. And it's amazing because I'll be seeing the same thing before they say that. And then we talk about what is that actually doing, that energy. What is it actually? What's its purpose? Sometimes I'll even bring them in dialogue with that energy. Not in the sense of get thee behind me, Satan kind of thing, but in the sense of, well, what are you teaching me here? What's the purpose? When did you come in?
Because it could be a defense mechanism that has served them well for a long time. Absolutely. And is currently getting in the way. Perfectly said. And that's why I try to teach them gratitude, an attitude of gratitude, even with those blockages, because we don't want to bring in sort of conflictual, bellicose energy in the spirit of getting them out. You said bring in gratitude, or at least this is how I work. I bring in gratitude, but then I no longer need you, and so you can kind of gently process those through. That's just one way as you were talking, it brings to mind. I like that a lot. Yeah, dissociation is complicated because you can see when people check out, sometimes they'll talk through it, sometimes their jaw will clench, like anything to block the intensity of the feeling. But with dissociation, it's like their brain is like, I'm not going there, but energy is neither created nor destroyed. So it's still stored up in their central nervous system, and anytime something similar comes up for them, it's like they're either going to dissociate again, or it comes out as fight or flight, or freeze is so complicated. What is it? Those Swedish scientists could only boil it down to 13 different responses of freeze.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right.
So, helping them navigate that blockage in a way that honors them. Like you were saying, and making sure we're not transposing our desire for them to be well, or the speed at which we would like to work onto them. It has to be like a sacred partnership between me and the client.
Yeah, that's such a good point. There are times when we both identify a certain thing, and then they would say, I'm not ready yet, and then we just close the tab and move on to the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's absolutely. Pacing is so important, and having a client dictate that pace, huh?
Yeah. And often, sometimes the client will be like, I want it gone, I want it gone, I want it gone. But it's like, I like that you slow them down, and it's like, well, let's look at the purpose this is serving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If we don't learn the catalysts, we repeat them, huh?
Yeah.
It seems like that's a cosmic law, is karma perhaps. We're invited to repeat the lessons, even if the lessons are on the surface coming to us in different ways. The undercurrent, the essence of the lesson gets packaged up and repeated until we kind of learn it. Is that your experience?
Yeah, and some people picture that as the spiral staircase because we expect progress to go from 0 to 100. Like, I've learned it, I'm done, close the book, put it down. I don't have to ever deal with it again. That's not really how it usually works. Usually it's we make progress, we gain resources and understanding and wisdom and coping skills, and then we walk further up the staircase and we're like, how is this happening again?
Yeah.
But we don't recognize that we're making incredible progress with this thing, and that we're etching away. And because I always tell my clients, no matter how healed you become, feelings are gonna still feel
Always.
like feelings.
Yeah.
Sadness is still gonna feel like sadness.
Yes.
Desperation is still gonna feel like desperation.
That's right.
Loneliness, that's a big one.
Yes.
Loneliness is still going to be an experience that you have.
Yes.
And when you feel those feelings, sometimes it's linked within your neural pathways. Oh, I'm back where I was 20 years ago. No, you're not.
Yep. Because then the anxiety gets worse. Like, oh, I haven't moved at all. I haven't progressed. That's the anxiety, which is really not true.
Right. And I think it's so important that we remember what we've learned, that what showed up, what we have begun to let go. Because just like we're seeing in the external atmosphere, if we try to erase history, then we repeat it.
That's where I wanted to go, because that is exactly my understanding right now too, is this sense in the collective humanity, the collective humanity in the West, perhaps all over the world, but our particular geographical experience is Texas, the Dallas area, in the United States, but also the United States as a country in general, and this collective confluence of energies that's happening right now, that is breathtaking when you're an empath and it hits you like a tsunami. I mean, and it is not gentle. It is coming at you at 100 miles an hour, and it's way taller than you. How to hold space for that, because as you said, we don't want to. What was the defense mechanism that you moved into? The
spiritual bypass.
Yeah, but you had said it earlier at the very beginning when you talked about you don't engage with it at all. You just kind of, it'll come to me.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot what I said.
It was beautiful. But you said you don't engage with it, and so you have learned to stand there and let it crash upon you.
Avoidance.
Avoidance, thank you.
Oh yeah, it's the top coping skill most of my clients come through the door with.
Yeah.
So sorry.
That's okay. And so the the tsunami that's coming in and then crashing, and then you've learned to not avoid it, but rather embrace it, let it go through you in some ways. Boy, is that hard to do. And I know for me, I'm just going to speak to my own personal struggles with this one. What's going on is, and as you rightly say, it was, for me, it was really kind of beginning in 2016. And then 2020, and then now. Those were the big areas where I felt a lot of psychic pain, emotional pain. And in my own family of origin, I have people within my family who would have the exact opposite feelings that I would be feeling, where I felt a sense of anxiety and being stifled. They felt a freedom. And how do you maintain a healthy relationship with somebody who is real happy, for example, that a certain president now is making certain waves and happiness, and I mean, not happiness, but like chaos, you know, in purpose.
Right.
Like, how do you, when you have family members that are just, this is equivalent to Jesus Christ coming back, you know, that kind of thing. Whereas I see it as the 2 steps back before you can have the 3 steps forward. Or, for example, right now, family members, acquaintances, friends, people that I worship with, and certain clients will literally view the Supreme Court's decision about Roe v. Wade, and then now even the prospect of rolling back LGBTQ rights, and contraception, and all of these things that were hard fought and won.
Removing the word slavery from textbooks, my BIPOC clients were having to process the trauma around that yesterday.
I have these people in my life that really feel my side is winning, that my Jesus is finally coming, that all of the good things finally are coming to fruition after all of the prayers and protests and all of this. That is actually a sign of the victory of God. And so there's a jubilation. They're living in the resurrection. You know, they've been crucified for years upon sadness, and now this is their victory. Whereas I'm feeling that, again, we're not moving forward. Now, maybe because I have a limited space, maybe this is the actual step. The 2 steps back is necessary so that you can spring the next 3 steps forward. I mean, that's how
what
it works.
I always hold on to.
Yeah, me too. The hope.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me more about that.
Absolutely. That, I mean, you can live life with certain assumptions, underscoring all your emotional and physical experiences. And one of the assumptions that I live with that hasn't done me wrong so far is just that I don't have the full picture, and God's always working for the highest and best good of all involved. And I may not be privy to that information. And
you may never know. Isn't that called hope and faith? Or how would you define that?
Yeah, I guess it would be hope and faith, and trust.
And trust.
Yeah. Although faith, I guess, encompasses trust, but it's like on a personal level too, rather than like the macrocosm. It's very, I have a very personal relationship with Source, with God, and with all, you know, the beings and frequencies in the subtle realms, and we're all working together. Yeah,
a sense of teamwork, and that your job is to be incarnated here, to not know the picture, and then with that, still have faith that you're a part of a macro that's moving a goodness, that it's part of the ultimate plan of God at the highest good. Is that how you're saying?
Yeah. Absolutely, and that oppression will not win.
Because love wins.
It's a little biased, but right. I don't think oppression will win, and I may not know exactly what that will look like.
Yep.
But I know that the tendency is when you're right in the midst of the oppressive energy, and you see people celebrating, and you see, wow, they really think they are saved. They think the world is saved. To be able to step back and have space for that opposition within you can be really challenging unless you really work through all the other parts of you that want to rear up against it.
Perfectly said. I think that's also exactly what's happening on the macro. And what do you do inside you with the parts that want to rise up against it, to have this conflictual energy inside you, and you're the compassionate witness that's watching it happen? because part of inner work is to detach from the actual conflict, allow the conflict to happen in a sense, but be detached, watch it, and then somehow help it resolve. So what do you do when you see that, the parts of you that want to resist? What do you do inside?
Well, I just notice when there's an inner persecutor wanting to attack, or if I'm doing and behaving in ways or desiring to behave in ways that are outside of my value system and what's in alignment with me and my spirit. And so just trying to consciously be in the moment and make space for those parts, but not let them run the show. Because absolutely, I think we need to rise up. So maybe that was the wrong words, but to become a persecutor, no.
That right there is where I want to go, because I absolutely agree with you. I think if you rise up and remain grounded and have the hope, faith, and for me, the word faith equals hope plus trust. I mean, I know
that makes sense.
It's a very left brain way to think of it, but in some ways, if I can understand hope plus trust, which are interpenetrating concepts. I mean, they're kind of concepts on their own, but they're interpenetrating. Hope plus trust equals for me this concept of faith. So when I have the faith of a goodness, that love wins, that unity wins, there's only unity, not uniformity. There's a difference. A lot of people, I think, would see uniformity or unity as defined as uniformity, that we all need to be thinking this one thing because God is this exact way and wants it exactly like this. Rather, I think unity is diversity, which is honored, maintained, and protected by love. That it's all contained and held together in love, through love, by love, as love, and all of it together, working together, is unity. So when I can hold faith for that kind of unity and know that I am part of an incarnated experience that helps steward the unity, steward what seems to be broken here into this unity, then I can engage with whatever conflict I see out there. But I'm not going to be, well, at least for me, having my identity be fully defined as needing to win.
Right. It's really interesting too, because I've learned a lot about myself and watched my clients as well, and I learn a ton from them. But just that anger is absolutely a useful tool, but it has to be within the right range. Because anger, as you know,
within the right range.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to us about that. That's really good.
Well, within the trauma hierarchy, you have to get up out of freeze. You have to get out of flight, and then you come into the space of anger, and anger can be a real catalyst to help you take actionable steps towards empowering yourself within any given situation, even in the most ridiculous, horrible, horrific situations I've seen my clients in, that if they can get to that stage where they're real uncomfortable, where they're angry but not too angry, because it's like, I don't know if we saw the emotional thermometer, if it's 5 or above, at that point you're not really acting in alignment with yourself because other things are taking over.
All right, we're going to be doing some tangents, as you and I both have ADHD.
Yes, we do.
So we're going to honor that neurodiversity that we have, and because I want to go into a direction right there as part of a new tab and a new screen. What do you do personally, and or when you're with clients who they have managed to skirt around the I call it the red hole, or the black hole of becoming anger level 5 or whatever you just said, because there's a certain kind of way that when I get sucked into, I see it as an event horizon of the black hole, and then when you cross over that, then we become identified with the emotion. Mm-hmm. Instead of I have anger, it's I am angry.
Right.
And instead of I have anxiety, it's I am anxious. We become one and the same, fused with that. And I think Eckhart Tolle calls it the pain body. It's the sense of the pain body, a possession, almost a possession that possesses you. Mm-hmm. Metaphysically, we can even talk about it as a thought form that comes in, that does possess us in a way. And so when a person is possessed by the pain body in the thought form or at level 5, what can you do when you're already there?
Well, I'm going to talk in a very grounded way,
Yeah.
and not metaphysically, and just say that there are hormones that and neurochemicals that are then pumping through the body that you really need to get out of your system in order to get to the space where you can begin to get back to yourself. So I'll tell people to do something with it, scream into a pillow, take a Ziploc bag, put ice cubes in it and stomp on it, like whatever feels good and doesn't harm you or other people, and they'll find that that burns through those chemicals pretty quickly, and then they can get back to themselves. Or if you look at emotional transformation therapy, you yell and then you take a deep breath, and then you yell and you take a deep breath. So again, it's with that allowing the emotion grounding to the present moment, allowing the emotion grounding to the present moment. And often the anger is transmuted pretty quickly into something much more usable, where you can decide what's in alignment with me. What do I want to do now? Do I want to march? Do I want to talk to allies? Do I, what feels right to me in this situation, because I'm no longer possessed by the anger, and now it's usable.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Sounds like that's going to be something I'm going to put in my toolbox as a counselor. There's a couple things that I do with myself, but also with people. And one of the things that I do is we talk about, if you're already in the black hole or whatever of the anger, and you've identified yourself, I've identified myself as I am this, and there's no resistance at that point. I mean, so any trying to resist being angry, or just the attempts of skirting around the black hole and having some sense of agency around the black hole is gone, because you're in it. So when that happens, then I just fully surrender into the fact that at this exact moment, I'm in the black hole. I'm going to feel the anger. It's absolutely there for me. And all I can do at this point is, I guess, some of the ACT stuff is diffuse, just work on this diffusion of the thought and the feeling, the identity and the feeling. And it's all premised upon acceptance, accepting that it's there. And so then what I try to say to people is, it's not that you're not going to feel that. It's just that it's going to be reduced in duration and in intensity. So it's turning down the volume from 9 to 4, and you can work with 4. And so there's certain exercises, emotional exercises that I might lead them on. And often it's trance work and that kind of thing. But I like what you're saying too. It's the physicality, bringing your bodies into it and then doing something with that.
Right, and you don't always have to do that with other emotions, but with anger in particular, I found that it's really necessary almost for the physicality of it, or some kind of yelling, or there's a lot of physicality specifically with anger.
I wonder if that's, and usually we associate anger with like the color red. Do you do that at all, or?
In emotional transformation therapy, it comes from the solar plexus, and it's typically yellow.
Yellow. Okay.
It's yellow. Yellow is also the same color where we feel trapped and powerless, because, as you know, anger is complex.
Yeah.
And sometimes anger is like someone has stepped on my values, they've stepped on my rights, it's out of alignment with me. Other times anger is I feel powerless, I feel trapped. I'm trying to regain control.
Yeah.
And so it's all in the same spectrum.
Well, what does it look like then to take anger and move it into the green ray of the heart, or more what's called love and understanding? What is it? I don't know what that looks like for ETT.
Well, I think what usually happens when people work through their anger is then almost like very frequently it turns into sadness.
Yes.
So often.
Wasn't it sadness always? I mean, in some ways, wasn't it sadness? And
yeah,
then
often underneath anger a deep, deep hurt.
Right. That's what I say
But
too.
anger is easier to feel. It's
Exactly.
more physical. It's not as vulnerable almost as sadness is.
Yeah. Boy, that is so true. And in my office, I have always at the ready the picture of the iceberg. And what I usually say is, if you can picture the water level and just a little bit above the water is the conscious level that's sticking above the water. But I always point to the bottom, and I say that right below the water level, underneath the water, is the subconscious. And then below that are the different layers of unconscious. And the subconscious usually are things that we know are there. We remember, absolutely. We even know that it's likely dictating our conscious, but we're not ready or not able to deal with it. But it's right there. We know it's there. This did happen to me. Then the unconscious is often areas where we literally don't know yet, especially the very bottom. And what I usually find is that at maybe not the exact bottom down here, but just somewhere right above the bottom, it's deep grief. It's a grief that is, if you touched it, you'd cry for days, you know. But then as it bubbles up into the conscious, it starts to move in that direction at least, it does morph into anger. And when a person when they deal with the anger, that can be real helpful, but it's still not the source of the anger. You have to go a little bit deeper and recognize that. Is that your experience?
Yeah, that's often my experience. They're going to work through solar plexus into the heart chakra, and then that creative energy into the throat chakra. Maybe their voice has been stifled. Maybe they can use their spiritual gifts to empower whatever's going on both in their external and internal world.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah, that's my experience too. So what do we do when we're trying to, because there's going to be a lot of people who might listen to this, who would identify themselves as expansive spiritual seekers, you know, not of rigid doctrine or dogma of one particular lens, and feeling empathic, this sense of spirituality and empathy, and able to feel energies. And right now, a lot of them are really struggling with that. Right. It's bringing up their own trauma that they thought they dealt with, and it's coming up in full force. So now you have trauma out there matched with the trauma inside. What the hell do you do?
Right.
So what have you been helping people? What is some of the things that you're doing?
Well, first, connection helps so much. So connecting with someone who will resonate with your pain and has worked on themselves and can resonate with the healing around it too, rather than just inciting you into more anger and helplessness.
So you're normalizing, you're validating.
Normalizing, validating, connecting. And sometimes it's really magical, like a client who was so distraught and just was really falling into that helplessness void and really overwhelming, and then connected with some other people going through the same thing and found herself giving all of them hope. Oh. Like, I'm here with you, I support you, I stand next to you, people are telling you you're going to hell, but I'm here with you and I believe you're not.
Yeah.
You know, and then ended up feeling empowered in just connecting and supporting each other.
Well, isn't it a spiritual truth? I mean, it's almost a cosmic law that it is in giving that we receive. Mm-hmm. It's like you give it away in order to keep it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think people really knowing when they need to step back from social media, step back from the people in their lives that are going through this intensely, just really being attuned to yourself, really practicing kindness and compassion with yourself. And it may be an inconvenient day to step back, but if your central nervous system and your emotions are letting you know, like, this is too much, honor it 100%. And then when your spirit is calling you to use your voice, do it.
That's just well said. I'm thinking of people will often come to me and say they don't they're in a rut. They don't know how to get out of a certain kind of way to be. And a lot of it might be eventually they learn that they have been so hard on themselves, they don't know what self-compassion looks like. Well, maybe they've even been taught that that's a sinful thing or somehow negative. They picked up that childhood message for whatever reasons. And when they can learn how to honor their own need for the both and, in other words, both you can be gentle with yourself, self-compassionate, pull away, breathe, and engage at a time that is appropriate for you, is the great work for them.
Absolutely. Because you can both be gentle and compassionate with yourself and be empowered and strong and resilient in the world at the same time.
And that, at the same time, that both and message is not modeled in our world, except for wisdom traditions in some way, or people are trying to steward these wisdom traditions and translate them in ways that people can understand.
Right. And a good indicator for me, like a litmus test, is when I notice that I'm falling into the political polarity and losing sight of compassion for people who see themselves on the other side of the issue, then I know, okay, I'm out of alignment. I've got to look at the parts of self. I've got to honor what's showing up for me and take a step back until I can kind of get my bearings.
I'm so glad you said that. I think that is not only true for me, but I think that is what we need to do. Like, that's the way through this, people. That's the way through. The macro is not going to be changed without the micro, you and me, working on our inner selves and then re-engaging, because then the macro starts to take on the character of the micro, because we are the creator of the macro. Is that not true?
Right.
And what has been true for me over and over again, and I don't know when I'm going to learn this lesson so that it's automatic, but it seems like it's just what I've got to do right now. It evidences my own spiritual immaturity in some ways. But when I am triggered with what you just said, the political and emotional polarity that is in the world, and when that happens and my anxiety goes up, it'll go up to a point where I'm sort of forced on my knees. And I mean that fairly literally, because what I have found in my life at that moment is, without even knowing it, and it being insidious in the sense that it's step by step by step where I don't see it on a day-to-day basis, I have disconnected with a personal unit of consciousness with God. Now, this is tricky because in my life, my own spiritual journey has brought me to a certain kind of enjoyment of units of consciousness that's always there. Like, I never see myself as apart from God or of God, and I see everything that's happening as being belonging inside of God, and God is spirit is infused in everything and creating really what's happening too. But I never feel outside of God. So there's an absolute conceptual and even heart knowledge that I'm one with God. And at the same time, when I myself, as little Doug, that inside my false self, my egoic self, which I didn't even know I was, and I was thinking I might have been in my true self, I start getting stuck in the anxiety and all of this stuff, the anger and anxiety, which leads me personally, because of my own mental patterns, into a kind of depression and loss of identity and perspective and all which comes with that. I realized that I have actually not been building the muscle or exercising the muscle of personal connection with my understanding of a personal divinity. And when I can connect heart to heart, it's like a new day, the dawning, golden dew, and this is how I see it. I mean, I effectively see with my heart eyes that's as real as that I'm seeing you is a golden dew just comes and just gives me an energy wash, just washes it all away. And I see 2 seconds before, which was a world scattered in the energies of chaos, just yellows, blacks, and brown shadows, and just boom, colliding and fighting. It's all pristine and beautiful and held, and there's perspective, and it's like I'm excited to be here. But it's because the connection. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I can really relate to a lot of aspects of that, and I actually consciously, before I get to that point, do my clearing where I let the light wash over me. Often I do it after every counseling session. I do it at the end of the day, after I've had my reflection time as I'm driving home. Like, it happens very regularly, but absolutely when I get into trouble when I'm not taking the time to really connect within every single day, and I get lost in the maelstrom. And as an empath, that comes at a huge price. I know there are so many empaths in the world now, where we can feel it viscerally in our bodies, and it's just so important for me. I feel like getting grounded out in nature is one of the top things that I have to do. I could either spend 2 hours meditating, or I can go outside in nature. That's what I always joke.
For how long?
Nature is pretty quick.
Yeah, right?
I don't have to be out there that long. Because, Source has given us the skills and the tools to be a part of and be grounded at the same time, because I don't want to see myself as above the oppression. I don't want to, I want to see the places in my life where I've become the rescuer or the persecutor, if we're talking about the Cartman triangle.
Yeah.
I want to notice, what is this teaching me, like everything we've talked about. So it's just, and it's hard to do it all in process. And like you're talking about the egoic self, I see it as remembering that I'm going to do all of this perfectly, imperfectly.
Say that last sentence again. That's good. I'm going to remember this.
Do all of this perfectly, imperfectly, because I'm going to lash out on accident, or I'm going to slip up and not take a chance to take action where I could have taken action, and just forgiveness around those things. And if we can forgive ourselves for the ways that we are acting imperfectly amidst the maelstrom, then we can forgive others for acting imperfectly amidst it, and they don't become persecutors anymore. We've stepped into empowerment.
That's well said, because I know as a 2 on the Enneagram, my great movement is to help be a loving person in people's lives, to heal, give, that kind of stuff. And I want people to like me. That's one of our shadow sides. Everybody has these, but 2s make art forms of it. Excuse me. And so when I do something imperfectly, and I can see that my actions or voice or whatever I just said has stopped the flow between me and another person or a group, I can feel that this energy of shame washes over me. That again is like a tsunami. My ears get hot, my face gets red, and inside what I feel in my throat and down here in my solar plexus, the words like usually they're cuss words, but but it's like hate. It's self-hate. Like that's kind of, and for a long time that I would stay with that energy way too long, until I realized that I was free to not. But I don't want to forget the lesson. In other words, I don't want to spiritual bypass myself by just saying, well, I'm going to just push all that down and just say I'm better. In other words, in sort of in the spirit of being a narcissist. You don't want to do that. And so forgiveness is really the key to unlocking that shame.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not like you won't feel that shame when I mess up, but when I can bring in real grounded forgiveness, because this is part of being the journey, and I can offer my brokenness and my mistakes to somebody else and say, it's okay. then I don't have to. The intensity of the shame is decreased in duration and intensity. Is that your thoughts? Or?
Oh, absolutely. And I would say, I know what is it? Fauci is that the one who releases all the information about diseases and everything. He said his top concern in the nation right now is loneliness for effects on health, because our mental, spiritual, physical health are all so deeply connected. And I would say, I think also shame. Shame is the biggest and deepest that I've seen with my clients, that just deteriorates your ability to operate in the world. And so self-forgiveness becomes then the medicine. So because we are going to behave imperfectly, I mean, that's part of our humanness. We can't be an empath and be amidst the storm and be this perfect ship sailing, not affected by the wind at all. I mean, that doesn't make sense. So, we have to notice where we've stepped out of alignment with ourselves, do our best to course correct and continue to move forward. And I think that's the most important thing in this whole process.
As we wind up this discussion, I just want to share one thing too that I do, and I want to run this by you and see what your thoughts are. I deeply know what loneliness feels like. I've been lonely as long as I remember. I mean, I remember even in first grade was when I first had my first UFO experience, actually. Because at that particular time, I'll never forget, I was 6 or 7 years old. I was some weird way in a season very devoted to all things UFOs and aliens and things like that, and supernatural and beings and reincarnation. I mean, I was 7 years old. I'm rifling through books and just.
Well, that's a sign of something.
It's just, I know it's a great delusion. So I was really into that, and but I also had a UFO experience in the country at that particular time that did some healing work for me. At the same time, a year later in second grade, I remember feeling such intense loneliness. I remember saying out loud, I don't think I can do my mission. And that's as a second grader, having some sense of mission, but that it was too much. Like the disconnect, the loneliness was too much. I've always felt the background of this loneliness. I've never not felt it. But I've grown to have a certain holiness around that I've given loneliness its temple, its altar and temple inside me. Because for me, that is the, if you will, the void in which that I'm going to hold it sacred, because that's where the divine comes and kisses. That's where this sort of consummation that happens, where it's the beloved and the lover, that kind of thing, the divine way inside. And some have said it's called a God-sized hole in you because only God can fill it. But it's a pithy statement, but it's true for me. Too much loneliness is absolutely detrimental. And so there's a certain kind of level of loneliness that I honor. And then also know when there's too much, there's some things that I can do inside me that I haven't even realized that I've cut myself off by not being human, because I'm here to be human, to be fully incarnated and to enjoy friendships and reaching out and taking that vulnerability and calling people and having human conversation, connection. When I'm overly lonely, I haven't done that. Or maybe I haven't connected well with my wife or something like that, or my kids. But loneliness is important for me in some ways. But when I feel lonely, that's too much, or anxiety or depression or some kind of emotion that's too much, what I have found that helps me really reduce the intensity and the duration of it is an act of service. Now, you touched on that. And even now, I think in the psychological literature, there's been a lot of studies on the efficaciousness of prescribing service in counseling.
Right.
That actually part of the the prescription I'm giving somebody is find a volunteer where you do something for somebody or something free and you don't expect anything. Like actually as a part of their getting better. But one act of service that I do, and it's been really, really helpful for me, is I will fully feel the pain that I'm in right now. I'm not running away with it. And then I actually offer it up. It's almost like an offering. And the word sacrifice means to make holy. Sacra is holy, and vice is Latin for to make. So to make holy this pain that I am through offering it up in solidarity with everyone or anyone in the world right now that I don't know who is feeling this feeling of anxiety or pain or desperation or something, whatever it is, and simply say in my intention, I see you, I'm in solidarity with you, and I wish you wellness, peace, happiness, and love so you can bear this burden and you're not alone. And when I do that, I feel a connection because love counts, intentions count, love wins. And when I do that, I feel it's not like that the pain goes away immediately, but that it's sort of like it becomes a fragrance of connectedness, my ticket to being in the human race. And when I can embrace it that way, that we're all doing this together and I can offer my love to somebody because I know what it feels like, that's when I start to feel the release and I can get back into the present. So that's just something that I do.
Yeah. I love Kristen Neff, and
oh yeah,
it's so good with acknowledging the different steps to self-compassion. It reminds me of that you've added in the act of service, which is really cool. But I think of emotions as waves that ride at the crust where we think we can't handle it any longer. That's when it breaks and it actually dissipates and it is relieved from our system. And a lot can be said for doing acts of service for others, but I know some people who have a spiritual calling can overdo that.
Yes, boy, that's the truth.
So the balance, right?
The balance.
And really tuning into yourself and identifying, what would feel in alignment with me, not letting your current emotions dictate everything, but what would feel in alignment with me, both with my emotions as a compass and my underlying core beliefs, and getting them all on board together.
Beautiful. Thank you. This was fantastic.
Yes, thank you. It was fun.
I appreciate it. Deep stuff. So I'm going to close this out with kind of a closing benediction in a sense. I take a couple of deep breaths here. Just want to offer up all of our conversation energy that we exchanged and created a new energetic. I want to offer this up in a loving gesture to the infinite creator who gave us our vocations. We complete this loop. The gifts you give us, we offer back to you. And in anybody who receives these words, if they are helped, or in some ways it helps them relieve whatever burden they're carrying, or gives them hope or faith or solidarity of being walked with, then we are indeed very grateful. We thank you again for this opportunity. Bless Brandy and her vocation as a wife and mother and friend, daughter, and channel of love and light, divine, for her clients. Bless me as a husband, father to my 3 kids, son and friend, and channel of love and light to my clients. And we ask for the highest and best good for the two of us, for all of those who are listening, and for those in the whole world. Amen.
Amen.